Okay, I believe we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly live stream interview series and performance series. Today we have the great pleasure of having the wonderful trumpeter and educator and musician, Andy Omdahl, joining us. Andy, thank you for being here with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to the concert on Sunday. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Before we delve in too much here, as I always forget to do this stuff, I'll do it at the beginning. We'd like to thank our sponsors, and that, of course, is Ted Brown Music, KNKX, Tacoma Creates, BCRA, Titus Will Cars, and Edward Jones financial consultant Rick Gray. So that certainly helps make all of this stuff possible. And, of course, to everyone that tunes in to watch this stuff and enjoy it, or coming out to the concerts in person, that helps us out as well. And that also allows us to keep things free and open to the public in all ages, which is very important to us because art should be accessible to everyone. So, Andy, you've been around here for a long time. And I basically say the same thing to all of our guests. Many musicians know you and your tremendous reputation. But for people that don't know you and your work, where did you grow up and how did you get started playing music?
It's kind of a long story. My father was in the service, and I was born in North Carolina. So a few years there, moved to California when I was a young kid, and then we moved back to the East Coast and back to North Carolina, and that's where I fell in love with the bugle via the Boy Scouts, and so the bugle was kind of a path to trumpet. So. Fast forward, we moved up to New York, to Long Island, New York for a year. My dad was a public affairs officer up there. And I heard this kid playing a trumpet next door. And I thought, I could play a bugle. And it sounds a little better than what that kid's trying to do. So I started playing trumpet at age 12.
Okay, right on.
I studied with a guy named Carl Seppi in middle school. Then we moved back to the West Coast. And so I pursued some more private lessons with a guy through junior high and high school, and then linked up with Claude Gordon, who was my real mentor teacher for 7.5 years. Great name, big name. Yeah. So that's how it all started. I started at 12.
Okay. Well, prior to picking up the bugle, with Boy Scouts, was there, what was your mother or father, were they musicians or by any stretch of the imagination?
They were. My mom was a piano player, so we always had a piano in the house. Okay. And I like plunking on the piano and understanding chords and things like that. I'd go through the Hanon exercises, and I was kind of a beginning piano player, but didn't pick it up because it was, I was 10, 9, 8, 7 years old. Yeah. Not interested in dedicating that kind of time to piano lessons.
But what about like listening to music? Do your parents have, music on in the house, or was there a music around to listen to?
Quite a bit. Both my mom and dad were barbershoppers. Mm-hmm. And so they were big into the Broadway musicals. And we had record players playing, the Music Man, Sound and Music, you name it. So I fell in love with those early on.
Yeah, lots of good writers and composers too. And that kind of stuff. So.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Well, so then with your trumpet teacher, did he make you aware of any, was it all classical stuff, or did you start getting into jazz? When did that start taking hold?
I was always in love with jazz. He was basically focused on the physical elements of playing. So it's range and blowing and sound and fingers and tongue. Yeah. Very, very physical. Never really worked much on styles with him until I went into the service.
Okay. And prior to going into the service, you're playing the trumpet. Were you aware of, aside from your teacher, were you aware of any other trumpet players that you listened to or that you admired their playing?
Oh, I was in love with Freddie Hubbard back in the day, Miles Davis. Maynard Ferguson was a huge influence.
Yeah.
In just the sheer power that he put out was fascinating to me. So I sort of modeled after him as well. Okay. Oh, Art Farmer, Harry James, yeah, and the Hollywood guys.
Right. Well, you're on the West Coast. Did you get a chance to see any of these folks perform live when you were younger, or was it just all recordings?
I did many times. I used to go to Dante's in North Hollywood quite a bit and watch acts there. I went to the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson with the Doc Severinsen Band, probably 10, maybe a dozen times.
Okay.
And saw the band live, and it was just fascinating to see all that.
Yeah. I have this conversation with people all the time. You know, you go and see these concerts and you're there in person and you feel that sound and you have that experience, and records are great. They're wonderful, but it's not the same thing. And when you see those shows, it's hard to explain that feeling to other people.
Yeah, it's a whole different energy for sure. Live music is an energy that recorded music just doesn't convey.
Yeah.
It's a totally different energy. And of course, in the Tonight Show band, they were relegated to timing for commercials and, you know, Doc cutting the band off and they were just incidental to the show, but integral at the same time.
I should have mentioned this earlier, but if anybody has questions for myself or Andy, put them in the comments. We're going to do the interview for about 45 minutes, and then we'll get to questions. But there's actually a question right now because it's right on topic of what we're dealing with here. It's from Walter Kano. He wants to know, did Claude students often play on the CG Benjes or Selmers? And I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
CG Benjes in my day. I was with him from 71 to 78. And so he was doing the Benj line at that time. Okay. It wasn't until, I don't know, maybe 80s that he went to Selmer. That was after my time.
Okay.
But it was the CG Benjes. And I have 3 of those, and they're beloved horns. I just love them.
Right on. Well, okay. So you're young, you've got a great teacher, you're getting showed the ropes, you're hearing folks live, playing. What about like middle school, high school? Was there any band programs of anything to mention or speak of?
High school was really, really magical because we had a hugely supportive band booster club. We had a jazz band, a huge concert band. We were playing grade 5 literature at the time, and a sweepstakes winning marching band. So it was a huge, huge effort. And that was probably a big driver in me pursuing this as a profession.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And so did you have the opportunity outside of school? I mean, you're going to clubs, but were there any of your peers that you could get together and play with and put groups together and play outside of school?
Quite a bit. In fact, I was instrumental in doing a lot of that myself, just creating groups and finding performance opportunities, whether it be the local Vista Elks Club or retirement center, just to get out and play and play the standards that people wanted to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so then were there any of your classmates that were talented musicians that are still playing now that you can recall?
Oh, yeah. One guy, Larry Marigolano, is a big name down there. He's developed a compression training system. It's called CTS, compression training system for trumpet, where it develops a compressive exercise for the embouchure.
Oh, wow.
So Larry's still playing. Another friend of mine from Escondido, south of where I went to high school, Les Kepix, is still playing. He's kind of the main guy at the racetrack in Del Mar, who does all that stuff with the garb and the hat and plays the long trumpet. And so a few, yeah. And some have passed away. Some guys got into bad drugs, and they're no longer with us. Really wonderful talent, and that's just I hate to say par for the course, but it's kind of part of the music history.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you look at the other side of it. Then you have the folks that live the completely clean life, like Clifford Brown. He still died young, So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
Almost, yeah.
Well, in regards to the scene, you're seeing a lot of your heroes playing. Were there places where you could go sit in and play, and that had any jam sessions of note that you would go take part in?
Not on the LA scene. That was pretty closed up, and it was always very relegated to, let me, there was a time that I went to the local 47 and got a chance to play a few times there with rehearsal bands.
Okay.
But again, I had to drive 2.5 hours to get up there. I'm from North San Diego County. It was a big haul to get up there, usually in conjunction with a trumpet lesson.
Yeah.
So I'd stop in and see if there was anything available, and sometimes there was, and maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 times I had a chance to sit in and get spanked by the heavies.
Right on. Very cool. So who were some of the heavies around on the scene? Not touring musicians, but folks that lived there and played, that you can recall?
Well, there was Connie Condoli, Bob Summers was around, Don Ellis.
Okay.
I didn't play with him, but I went and saw his band rehearse a few times at the
Okay.
Union Hall. Let me think. There was a guy in Escondido, a really wonderful trumpet. I forget his name, older fella, that would have me and a friend of mine over and just go through routines with him. He would play something, we would repeat it, and it would just be a round robin of playing in his orange orchard
Okay.
in Escondido. It's
Cool.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Great player. Yeah.
Very cool. So high school, and then did you go from high school into the service, or was there college first? What was the progression?
I did a semester at Cal State Northridge.
Okay.
And I was digging it to an extent, but I was just at that point, I was just so burned out with school.
Yeah.
And so I did a couple of tours with various pickup bands. One was a really cool band out of Anaheim called what were they called? Oh, I forget the name. Anyway, we traveled up the West Coast to Vancouver and did a house gig in downtown Vancouver for like 6 weeks, and it was a great funk band. It was a lot of Stevie Wonder, four horns, great singer, great dancing, great player on the drums that toured with Stevie Wonder.
Yeah,
guy named Styx. I don't know what his last name was, but he was a hoot.
Hmm.
So that was one, and I did a tour with another band out of San Diego called Can't Handle It.
Okay.
And we went out to Albuquerque and Yuma and down south one winter.
Now, what time period are we talking about here?
1974, 3 and 4. I graduated from high school in 73, so 74, maybe early 75.
Okay, a couple different questions. Number one, to be a musician of that caliber, what were the expectations? And what I'm really asking here is, like, because obviously I've known you for a long time and you read incredibly well and you solo incredibly well. Were those requirements to be able to do these types of things, or was it all just you memorize the parts and go play, or how did it go back then for you?
For the Canada trip, it was a reading gig, and I had to know the charts. We were doing the pop stuff of the time, the hip stuff, the Cold Blood, Tower of Power, some early Tower of Power. So there was reading involved.
Yeah.
The other gig was just kind of pick it up and play because the tunes were popular at the time. Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So, and as far as improvisational requirements, there not many.
Yeah.
Not many at that time. It's just, horns were sort of, let's make the band sound good by playing these parts.
I get the sense from doing a lot of these interviews that there seem to be more opportunities for gigs and travel and that kind of stuff back then than there are now. Is that a fair assumption in your opinion?
I would say so. And my time in the military, that's when it was sort of, I don't know if the heyday, but when I spent 21 years in the military, and I think during that time, those kinds of gigs were on the decline over the years.
Yeah.
And so I kind of missed out on that from the aspect of being in that groove. But being in the military, I was playing with such great players that and I got a good deal out of it. So it didn't really matter.
Sure. Well, the other question I wanted to ask you, because I mean, still you're gigging all the time. The money, let's get right to it. The money that you were paid then for performing versus the money that gigs pay now. And I mean, that's because there's lots of different types of gigs. I mean, I know you do work with the SRJO here in Seattle. You still do club gigs and things like that. But just overall, is there much of a difference in the pay scale back from the 1970s until now, in your opinion?
God, I guess if I were a math guy, I would look at it from the standpoint of inflation. But I mean, cars were cheaper then. What would I get for a gig? 10 to $15 maybe. I'd play with a small tenor band and get $10 for a 3-hour gig then. Nowadays, I'm looking at minimum 100.
Yeah.
But with Nearly Dan, we're looking at 300 per or 400 per
Right. For sure.
for one gig.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a hard question to answer in that regard, but
because it's relative to the gig. It's relative to what type of gig is, and
I would say this, that I don't take the fluff anymore. I'm 68 years old. I just don't do the schlocky stuff. I go where the money is and where the quality is. I try to. At least.
Yeah, that's good for the sanity. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I don't need to pay those kinds of dues anymore.
That's right. Well, so let's talk about the service. Well, actually, before we do this, so prior to you getting in the service, were your parents supportive? I mean, obviously, most parents are supportive of their kids playing an instrument, but when you started doing more and more gigs, did they seem to support you as, taking on, these things as a musician?
They were 100% supportive. They paid for my lessons with Claude Gordon. They bought my horn, my CG bench. I mean, they were, and they paid. They gave me their car and full of gas to drive from San Diego 2.5 hours to Northridge to take lessons.
Yeah,
they funded all that. So yes, they were supportive.
Yeah.
And
did you feel
my parents?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and your father being a military man, did you feel an obligation? It's like, all right, they're doing this. I need to pull my weight and do my thing. Or you just loved it, I'm assuming.
What, you mean join the military?
No. Music.
Or music. Oh, yeah. He loved it. I loved it. And so I think there was a mutual support there. System built into it. It just was cyclical and it worked. And I really benefited from their support. Hugely.
Wonderful. Well, then, okay. So what was the impetus for you to want to join the military? What was that? I mean, obviously your father was a career military man. So what was the choice?
Couple things. One is he being a public affairs officer used to take me to events where the Marine band played. And I was always impressed with the quality of music that was selected, the quality of players, and just the energy they threw out. So I got burned out at San Fernando Valley State after the semester, and touring. The tours were just deadbeat, and I didn't see any future. But I saw the future my dad developed for himself and my mom. And being a military retiree. And I thought, I'm going to look at this and explore the different possibilities. So I went to the Air Force, I went to the Navy, and they were both full of trumpet players at the time that I was interested. So the Marines was next, and they had a guarantee. It's called a MEOP, Musician Enlistment Option Program. You can join and you're guaranteed a promotion, guaranteed school of music, and guaranteed, depending on how well you do, a duty station after the fact.
Yeah.
So I jumped on that, assuming I was going to do just 4 years.
Yeah.
Get out and become a band director and live happily ever after, right? Or try to pursue professional music.
Yeah. Delusions of grandeur.
God, I know. And I was under the old Vietnam era GI Bill that was pretty juicy. And I used every nickel of it after I retired. Sure. But anyway, so the Air Force wasn't taking anybody. So I joined the Marines, and I was a hot shot in the Marine Corps because I had all this training with Claude Gordon.
Yeah.
And went back to the School of Music. I was student of the month and graduated, won in my class, and got my choice of duty station. So where did I go? I went back to LA. I was stationed at Anaheim. Okay. And I continued with Claude Gordon.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of that. And the rest is there's more to it if you want to hear about it.
Of course. Yeah. Because I know you were in the military for quite some time. And didn't you also teach in the school?
Yeah. Well, so when I got back to when I was stationed in Anaheim at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro, I was still studying with Claude Gordon.
Yeah.
And I did 2.5 years there. I made meritorious sergeant, and they needed a trumpet instructor back at the School of Music in Norfolk, Virginia. So they called me and asked me if I was available or interested. I said, sure, I'd love to teach. So I spent 6 years there teaching.
Wow. Okay.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students.
Yeah.
It was a factory, but it was a hell of a experience for any teacher because you're just up against the clock every time. You're pushing these students out. You want them to do good. And I thought, okay, it's time to re-enlist. What am I going to do? And I thought to myself, I was playing with some really heavy players. I mean, a guy played with Ox back in the day when he was stationed in Hawaii, a Navy guy.
Yeah.
Formerly known as Seawind.
Okay.
And that's quality of stuff he was playing, and that was the quality of player I was playing with.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did that for 6 years. I taught for 6 years, and then I decided I want to throw my hat. I don't want to go back out as a player. I want to go back out as a leader.
Yeah.
So I threw my hat in to become a warrant officer. I was selected and became a band officer. Went back to the same band in Anaheim.
Okay.
Ran them for 4 years, had a blast. And then went to New Orleans for 2 years, ran the band there.
Okay.
And then very quickly back to the School of Music as the commander of the Marine element for 6 more years. And then I retired.
Okay.
At 21 and a half years in 1996 is when I got out.
So did you ever have any, I mean, obviously, for people that don't know, and I've had some friends that have, played in different groups, either the Navy or the Army or Marines or whatnot over the years, and reserves as well. But so what is a typical day of obligations outside of, the training or the teaching? What were other things that you were required to do?
Out in the bands, we were required to, physical training 2 or 3 times a week or more. We would do close order drill, work on our drill routine for maybe an hour a day. Always rehearse. We'd have maybe a jazz band rehearsal in the morning or a concert band rehearsal in the morning or that kind of thing in the afternoon, depending on our commitment load, which was always heavy.
Yeah.
Whether it was military ceremonies or parades or concerts, and maybe helping kids in schools. We go out and mentor kids in schools.
Yeah.
So it was varied. It was generally an 8-hour work day, and it was just peppered with whatever the requirement was for that day. If it was a performance, we'd maybe travel or fly out or something.
Yeah. Was this mostly like during your time? I mean, over all of these locations that you were serving, did you ever get a chance to go to other countries and teach and perform and play, or was it all in the U.S.?
Went to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba once, and just did a military ceremony there. Amsterdam, and that was a tattoo. It was a combined effort with another Marine band. So it was probably an 80-piece band that we flew over to Amsterdam and did an international tattoo, but no one-on-one with students on those kinds of things. Those were just go out and show the flag kind of thing.
Gotcha. When you went to Cuba, did you get a chance to meet any other trumpet players? Because I know that can be a humbling experience with those guys over there.
No, we were stuck on base. That was really kind of an unfair thing to say, but I went to Cuba after the fact, after I got out, and worked with kids at a school in Havana.
Right on.
It was a lot of fun.
Did you you mentioned you had 8-hour days? That's a lot of obligations. Did you have, if you wanted to, depending on where you were stationed at the time, could you get out and play other gigs or go see what's going on in the scene?
Yeah, I always had a quartet, always.
Yeah.
And we were always working. And when I was a young guy in the Marine Corps, this gunnery sergeant would say, "Hey, Lance Corporal Omdahl, you got 20 for 40?" I always had cash because I was working, right?
Yeah.
And he was always good for it, because if he got busted for having me loan him money, his career is over.
Yeah.
So I milked it. I milked this guy. George Foss, I'll never forget. Hey, you got 40 for 80? Yeah, okay. And he was always good for it. He was an interesting dude. I could always rely on him to pay me back.
Yeah.
But yes, I had gigs, and occasionally, when I was at the School of Music, I did a lot of show work. I did some Broadway touring shows that came into town. I did the Barnum and Bailey Circus a bunch when they came through back in
Okay.
the 80s.
Yeah.
So there were always opportunities to get out and play.
Yeah. Well, so now you mentioned California, and then you said from there, you said Norfolk, Virginia, correct?
Right. Virginia Beach is where I lived.
So what was the
Yeah.
scene like? And you said this is the 80s at this time now?
Yeah. Early 70s and throughout the 80s. Yeah.
Okay. So what was the scene like in Virginia at that time?
It was great. There were a lot of bands, a lot of horn bands working, and Virginia Beach is a resort town, so the summertime was always hopping.
Yeah.
There were outdoor festivals. The OJs would come through, or and they'd always pick up players, do things on the beach. So
Yeah.
it was very, very active, and I think it still is.
Mhm.
It's picking back up after the pandemic, from what I read.
So with your quartet, was that mostly made up of other folks in the service with you, or was it with local guys, depending on where you were?
They were service guys because we had rehearsal space and we were all on the same schedule, so it made it kind of easy to keep the core uh, together. And when we needed to rehearse, everything was there. There was no issue about anybody else getting on bass or me going off or anything. But yeah, that's kind of the way it worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about the scene in New Orleans? I mean, that goes without saying, but how was it
Oh,
when you were there?
wow. Well, I created a street band that played a bunch of Mardi Gras style second line music and some easy jazz standards like oh, do you know what it means to miss New Orleans? And I did some arrangements for four horns on different standards, like I don't know, what was the one that the women just loved? What a Wonderful World.
Oh, okay.
So the horn section had this beautiful lulling background as the rhythm singers were singing the lyrics, and the women
Okay.
just fawned over it.
Yeah. Right on.
The out of towners, everybody loved it.
Yeah. Okay. What did I want to ask you? Oh, okay. So you said you taught at this was the what was the name of the school that you taught for again? I'm sorry. Was it just
The Armed Forces School of Music?
Okay, Armed Forces. Okay. So, and how many years did you spend as an instructor there?
6 years.
6 years. Okay. Um, did you find I guess let me back up. What was the time period that you started teaching? What years in the time?
1978, and then I stopped in 84.
Okay. Did you find from the time that you were a student in the School of Music there versus the time when you were an instructor that the education changed? And this is not a loaded question. I'm asking this because, for myself, I mean, I've taught private lessons for a long time, but I've been teaching like a high school program for 21 years. And it seems like you have to take a different approach with students now than you did, say, 10, 20 years ago. Did you find that to be true? Or because it was the armed forces, it was like, this is the way it's going to be done. Do it this way.
I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think society had made that big evolution yet.
Yeah.
So, and those that came into the armed forces had a specific way and demeanor about them that they were expected to hold.
Yeah.
That being respectful and do your job to the best of your ability, that kind of stuff. But now, especially after the pandemic, the social withdrawal that our young folks have gone through has really created some problems.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that in your kids, or maybe that doesn't. Or maybe some of their peers, who knows? But to get back to the original question, I think that that may have been just starting to begin when I was still teaching there. That being this social and moral decay.
Yeah.
You know,
So you couldn't approach it like, let's say, the gunnery sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. That's not going to fly at the Armed Forces School of Music in the 1970s.
yeah, it did. It did. But nowadays it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Honestly, philosophies have changed. It's a more kinder, gentler military. Let's put it that way, and that's fine.
Yeah.
If they get results, that works. That's fine.
So you made the decision to retire from, and you were when you retired, you were no longer teaching. You were leading bands, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And what year was this when you decided to exit?
I punched out in 1996, in October 1996.
Okay. And at this time, you were back in Los Angeles or California, I should say?
I came back to Washington.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And here's why. My family had relocated from Southern California to Shelton, Washington. And my twin brother came up and he started his family. And I'd always come out here on vacation and visited during my career. I dug it out here.
Yeah.
But it was only during the summer.
I'm not talking trash, but I mean, of all the places in Washington, Shelton, that's very close to Gorst. I mean, it's
let me tell you, it's a third world place out there. And that's why I live in Olympia.
Fair enough. But not to sidebar things here. Go on. You moved out because your family's out here. But how did they choose Shelton from California?
Because my dad liked woodworking and he thought, hey, it's a logging town. Okay, well, there you go. He built a house out there. And anyway, so what am I missing?
So you decided to move out to Washington. You were getting out of the service, so you moved out to Washington to be close to your family.
Right. I went through a divorce after 18 years of marriage and left her in Virginia Beach.
Okay.
Moved all my stuff out here, and then I worked on cruise ships for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of based out of here thinking, yeah, maybe I'll go somewhere else. But I worked on cruise ships for 4 years, kind of getting my head back together after a divorce.
Sure, of course. So because those cruise ships can go anywhere. So where were you? What line were you with, and where did you end up going?
I was with Royal Caribbean for most of my time, and it was Caribbean stuff. And then I was on an inaugural crew for a new ship out of France, and we did the Mediterranean for an entire summer, and then did a transatlantic on that new ship to Boston, and then 4 weeks out of Boston up into New England during the fall. Then after that contract, I was contacted by Crystal Cruises for a world cruise, 99-day world cruise. So I joined that ship in Honolulu, and then we went all around the world, and that was the most fabulous experience I could ever imagine. Well, and then
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Then after that, I did various pickup cruises. They would need a sub for a lead trumpet player that is going on vacation. So I go out and do 6 weeks in Alaska, 6 weeks in Indonesia, or charter cruise in the Mediterranean. It was a blast, but it kind of got to me after a while. It was
That's what I was going to ask you, because I know also we have many mutual friends that have done these things, and playing on cruise ships is an entirely another different world in and of itself. So can you maybe, for people that don't know, can you maybe talk about what life is like being in a band on a cruise ship with other musicians, and maybe talk about like the expectations and things that I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're not supposed to fraternize with guests. You're not supposed to, the rooming conditions can be less than ideal, and the workload can be kind of a pain in the butt too. So can you maybe speak to some of those things?
Sure. Yeah. The requirements are fairly high because they need readers and doublers. Workday, I felt, was pretty easy cheesy, because we'd have all day in port, maybe a rehearsal with a celebrity act in the afternoon before, generally 2 shows. You do a first seating show and a second seating show. 2 nights a week there'd be a production show. Might be a comedy variety show on one night, and then usually a major act would come on. We did Maureen McGovern and people like that. I never thought it was all that difficult. What was difficult was it was just mundane.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. But I was on a journey to better myself after a divorce. So I was really into working out, yoga, being alone on shore and discovering things and learning about the world and taking advantage of that situation of being on a ship and going all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
The food, the food was excellent, and the rooms. Yeah, you got to double up with somebody.
Yeah,
and you're on the first deck with no windows unless you're the MD. So
Were you the MD?
I was the MD a few times.
Yeah. Okay.
You get your own porthole.
Wonderful. Yeah, in the below deck when you can see the ship sinking, you can see that.
Yeah, I was on this brand new ship and we did that transatlantic crossing. Huge hurricane force winds. We came into Boston. Oh, and the ship's engineer asked everybody to put the cat eye on the portholes. And there was a reason for that, because when I got to Boston, I took this cat eye off, and there was probably 10 gallons of rancid seawater that came into my cabin.
Wow!
From that horrific crossing.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, going back to the rooming with somebody. I mean, that takes a special kind of person. Obviously, I'm assuming that your years of military training prepared you for close quarters combat like that. Is that fair?
Of course, yeah. And my roommates were always gracious. It was fine. We knew what we were in for, and that the contract was only 6 months, and so we'd probably part ways and whatever.
Yeah, this was before social media, so you couldn't air all your grievances to the world about your roommate.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. Well, given all the places that you've traveled, I mean, you mentioned some stuff with the service, but with these cruises, what were some of your most memorable places that you went to, and maybe share some experiences? You don't have to, but if some come to mind.
One of the best experiences I had was when I was asked to sub for a first trumpet player in the orchestra on the Rhapsody of the Seas with Royal Caribbean in Brazil. And it was a test market to see how the Brazilian population would accept cruise ships. I think that's the way it went. And consequently, the ship's orchestra, which was it was a 9-piece, was intact. So Americans were playing in the ship's orchestra. All other bands were local Brazilian musicians that came on.
Wow. Okay.
And that was a great experience.
Yeah.
Interacting with them, playing with them. It was really wonderful.
And did that project survive? Did they take to cruise ships, or did that get torpedoed?
Yeah, they did. They did. I mean, a lot of Americans go down there too, but it was a test market, and I think it worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you, now I know you mentioned, going through divorce, and of course that's awful, and you getting your headspace back together, but did you have, or could you practice? Was there time for you to practice and develop that stuff further if you wanted to, or not really?
I did all the time. I would go in the showroom to practice, or up in the disco during the day when people are ashore and practice.
Okay.
I always found space and time and continued doing that.
Yeah. And so at this point, you were retired from the service. So, I mean, you have basically, so this was just extra income on top of retirement that you were getting.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So after the 4 years of doing that and traveling around the world, you decided to come back to Washington?
Right.
And then back to Shelton, or when did we get
to?
Okay.
I finished. I spent all of my GI Bill money at Evergreen State College, and I went through a master's in public administration.
Okay.
At Evergreen.
Okay.
And finished all that. So I lived in Olympia.
Yes.
And still do.
And so with the public administration, have you used that to any effect since? No.
Nah. other than understanding how pissy politics is.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I figured you would have already learned that from being in the service for so long.
Well,
But
I know. What some people don't learn. Yeah,
all
or
right.
slow
Well,
learners.
let's talk about Olympia, because you've been in Olympia. Well, you've been around the Pacific Northwest and the greater West Coast for a long time. What year did you get back to Olympia? What's the time frame now that we're looking at?
1990, I think 1999.
Okay.
And I rented a little apartment about 2 blocks from where I bought this house.
Okay. And
And
there's lots of other cities that you could have moved to. Did you choose Olympia because it's close to Shelton and family? It's in a bigger city and maybe has a music scene, or what was the decision process?
it was strategic. I chose Olympia because it was halfway between Seattle and halfway between Portland.
Okay.
Seattle and Portland, assuming that I might get calls from either place.
Yeah.
And it's mainly been Seattle.
Yeah. Did you have any idea at the time in the mid to late 90s that I-5 would be the mess that it is now?
No. It was pretty bad then, but I'll tell you, during, as you well know, the all that Tacoma work on I-5 took forever.
Oh, it's not done.
And
There'll be more.
There was actually this Marty McFly meme that came out a few years ago, and the professor says, they're in the DeLorean, and the professor sticks his head out and says, "Marty, it's 2045 and I-5 Tacoma still isn't done."
That's the way.
But you know what? It is a lot better now.
Yeah.
It is a lot better going north.
Okay. All right. I'll take it. Well, now, can you talk about, because Olympia has a long history of a great music scene. Can you talk about the music scene and kind of what was going on when you moved in the late 90s?
Yeah, there was a lot of local players here. Joe Bach was strong. Love Joe. A band called Obrador, which is a Cuban influenced band I played with for several years. That was big here, and was fortunate to have some time with them. And I did small group work. I played with Richard Lopez's the Olympia Jazz Initiative.
Yep.
That turned into the Jazz Senators that Norm Wallen started.
Yes.
Did you go to you knew Norm, right?
Yes, we used to call him Stormin' Norm Wallen.
Stormin' Norm.
Yeah, no, he was great. I mean,
Pierce College, right?
Pierce College. Yeah, that was an amazing band. You go through these things and you play in these things and you don't realize how good these groups are. And then after it's gone, you're like, man, that was an incredible experience. Because like at the time that I played there, the saxophone section was Alexei Nikolaev, Cliff Cologne, myself, Dave Johnson, Matt Townsend. Who else?
Dave Johnson. Wow.
Yeah. Pete Klinsman was in the band. Richard Lopez was in the band. Who else?
Frank Minear,
who was with Stan Kenton. Tom Metler was in the band.
Tom Metler.
Who else? I can see his face. He teaches at Mason Middle School. Come on, brain. Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. Oh, Carl Ronning. Carl Ronning was in the band.
Oh, Carl. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a good rhythm section. Roger Guard was there for a time. Anyways, lots of other folks, but it was a great band. And Norm was doing a lot of great charts, and he got in trouble.
I know.
As much as I love Norm, he was lifting charts and then not, crediting, so he got basically canned from the job. But that was an amazing time to be in that band.
He took you guys to Reno and places, Mount Hood, I guess.
Yes. Well, the thing is,
festivals.
It was a college band, but it was completely like a professional ringer
full
band.
Of ringers.
So we'd be going up against other like college programs and just decimating them. And the adjudicators are like, you guys understand that this is not fair, right? So it was fun for what it was while it lasted,
Yeah.
But so you were playing with Richard's group, and what about any playing with? I'm trying to think of other musicians that would have been around that sphere of influence. So I know
Tommy Russell,
Bert
Michael
Wilson,
Moore, Bert. Yeah, I used to go to Bert's house on occasion and hang out on Tuesdays.
Yeah. What about,
Uh,
I know Chuck Stentz was pretty active and helped with sessions, but I think maybe that was Bert's too. I don't know.
I love Chuck. Chuck was a great guy. I played gigs with him at the old Evergreen Ballroom.
Okay.
Chuck was a super close, good friend of Bill Ramsey.
Yes.
Yeah, they had a long history together.
Yep.
Oh
Now,
yeah, so I've go ahead.
I was going to
Sid
say,
Potter, of course.
yes. And so I first met Sid when he was directing University of Puget Sound's band. And I remember he brought out Arturo Sandoval. He brought out Ray Brown's trio, tons of great artists. But also, I mean, he ran that program for a long time, and he was really good at transcribing charts and bringing them in for the band. And he's always been quite good at that. Still,
Yeah.
I'm sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I haven't seen Sid in a while. He's in a place in a retirement home. I haven't seen him in years.
Yeah.
I've tried to contact him.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, so obviously great musicians. Who was down there? Steve Lucino, was he around at the time? Must have been.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what about clubs and places to play down there? Were there much to speak of, or did you have to get out of town for that?
There were a few there. One was the Spar, that's now the McMinimans.
Yes.
The back smoking room.
I remember this gig. Yeah.
I had a quartet, kind of a standing quartet gig there for several years.
Yes.
I'd have David Joyner and his then wife Maria would play, and I would bring people, just different players, in to play with my quartet. Another place was, let me think. It was kind of an underground place across the street. What was that called? Anyway, it was another venue that I played there with Obrador, and I did some theater work in town at the local theater.
Yeah.
Some rock and roll shows and some Christmas stuff.
And I'm assuming, was that a fishbowl? You used to do it?
Oh yeah, Fish. Yeah, I hosted an annual brass bash every Christmas.
Yeah,
I had these beautiful arrangements of 4 trombones and flugelhorn, and I started there. When would that have been? Probably in like 2000.
Yeah,
and it developed over 15 years into this huge brass bash that I ended up calling it, and it was in conjunction with it married up into a Thurston County Food Bank benefit.
Okay.
It was really kind of a cool thing, but we did Christmas music brass. It was a lot of fun. And I played a lot of Arts Walk quartet gigs there at the Fish, and maybe Mardi Gras events. I being, lived in New Orleans, I thought, Fat Tuesday is a good time to have music at a place. And if you want to do a theme menu, what better time to do it?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other places that I'm aware of that were around at
Rhythm
that
and
time.
Rye.
Yeah, Rhythm and Rye. Yeah, and before that, it was the Royal Lounge. Before there was the Royal Room in Seattle.
That's right.
Yeah. What about was it the Oyster House, Oyster Bar? They had music from time to time.
They did. I don't know if they still do. I've never played there. Yeah, but I know some folks do.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking these questions, I mean, beyond just the location, I think it's interesting, just the history of the music scene / jazz scene and the places that we're presenting. So that's why.
There was a place in Tumwater called the South Pacific that Bill Ramsey always raved about. It was like a major point of interest for national touring acts, like heavy hitters.
Yeah.
It's right down in Tumwater. It's closed down and boarded up now.
The other one I remember, there was a spot out there. Trosper's was doing something for a minute, at least for a year or two. Because I remember I did a show with you out there. This was a while ago. You came out and played.
Trosper's.
Yeah. Is it by Black Lake or?
It is.
Yeah.
And that's all a Fred Meyer place now. And the Trosper's is gone. It was a hotel, right?
I know one side was a restaurant and the other side was kind of like a big open room where they would have concerts.
Yeah.
for a hot minute. Anyways,
Yeah.
well,
I
we're
do
getting to that
recall
point.
that.
I will keep barraging with questions unless we have other questions. So if you have questions for Andy or myself, feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them now or after the fact. So I'll keep an eye here and see if I can see anything as they come in. So now currently, Andy, I mean, you're still living in Olympia, commuting to Seattle quite a bit. So I know you mentioned Nearly Dan. I know you play with them quite a bit, and also with SRJO. There you go, the Seattle Repertory Jazz Orchestra. Aside from those two groups, are there any other projects that you're involved with?
I occasionally get a call. In fact, I just got an email last week to play in the orchestra backing Andrea Bocelli
Oh,
on
wow.
Mother's
Cool.
Day.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'll be playing in that, and which is kind of a new genre of music for me. I've never been known as a classical player, but I've got the sensibility and the chops to contain, to bring it down.
Yes.
Yeah. So occasionally I get a call to do something like that. I played with the Who a few months ago up there at Climate Pledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm playing at a cool Presbyterian church at the First Presbyterian Church in Tacoma for a guy that writes beautiful brass music. So I do Easter and Christmas with him and whatever else, but that's a nice little brass outlet as well.
Very cool.
Tracy Knope calls me quite a bit to come in and help mentor the kids in the brass section in his band. So I've been
about University of Puget Sound.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So I'll go there and do a rehearsal or two, and then a performance, and just kind of help them along and give them some inspiration if possible.
Well, while we're waiting for questions, hopefully to come in, I would like to ask you, because you've worked with so many, aside from your own stuff, you've backed tons of world-class, large-name artists. So, are there any? Let's start with this. I mean, are there any that stick out in your mind as some of the favorite shows that you've done? It doesn't have to be the favorite, but some of like your most enjoyable, and why?
Oh, let's see. What pops up? Maureen McGovern, when I was cruising on ships, had the audacity to call The Morning After, which is the Poseidon Adventure theme of a sinking ship. So that was kind of memorable. Arturo Sandoval was great.
Yeah,
I played a couple times with him. John Faddis was a hoot. Let me think. Jimmy. I played with Jimmy Heath once at the Kennedy Center. Center, and I was in another repertory jazz ensemble called GAME, Great American Music Ensemble, GAME, GAME, based out of VCU in Richmond. And we go up and do the Kennedy Center, and play there. And Jimmy Heath was our guest one year, and he plays the bass. He's got this slap thing on the way he plays the bass because of a story that I heard about 4 months after I played with him. Jimmy Heath, this biographer wrote a book about Al Capone, and Al Capone, or the biographer, was reading a part of the book, and it just so happened that one of Al Capone's bootleggers was in a bad car accident in the 1920s, and his finger was almost severed. And of course, neurology of that day was, you either take it off or they'd have the technology to fix a nerve or a finger being severed. And Al Capone, being so worried about this guy and supportive, he supports those that support him. He went to the hospital and told the doc, sew that finger back on. And he turned out to be the most recorded bassist in jazz history, Milt Hinton. Now, had I known about this, I would have asked him about that. How is it working for Al Capone?
Yeah.
But he's got that slap, that lazy finger. That I think he was the father of slap bass.
Very cool. The Judge.
So that's kind of the Judge.
Yeah.
The Judge. Great photographer too.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, now let's go the other. And you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. But who were some of the performers that was just like a hot mess that you really did not enjoy working with? And maybe you don't have to name names, but maybe you can talk about the circumstance.
Huh. Yeah. Huh. Who was a pain in the ass? I don't know. And I think the older I get, as I reflect on anything like that, it's probably more me than them. um, I don't know. I don't think there are many that
Okay,
certainly that come to mind.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're getting towards the end here. I haven't seen any more. Haven't seen any more questions come in now. Maybe
All
they'll
right.
come in later. But what I'd like to ask you is what we ask all of our guests on here is here you are now in 2023 with all the experiences that you've had over the course of your life as a musician. I mean, you've traveled the world, you've played tons of different styles of music with lots of different great artists. If someone was coming to you as letting you know that they wanted to undertake becoming a musician and playing professionally, what are some things that you found to be personally helpful in your own growth and development that you would pass on to them?
Uh, always practice, always evolve, always learn, and just become a sponge. Just a constant sponge.
Yeah.
And evolve with the styles. If you don't evolve with the styles, you're not going to survive.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
Definitely.
music's always evolving. I mean, there's some cool stuff. I remember was that Miles Davis did that gal's tune, Body Time After
Time after
Time.
time, Cyndi Lauper. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure having you as a guest with us here today. I'm sorry it's so late. Today was nuts, and Sunday is going to be nuts, but that's why we're doing it tonight instead of Sunday. But glad we could do it. Thanks for taking the time. And it's been a pleasure, getting to pick your brain a little bit and delve into the dark and seedy past. So
Yeah.
thanks for enduring the questions, and I look forward to playing some music with you on Sunday. For those of you checking this out, you can join us in person at McMiniman's at Spanish Ballroom this coming Sunday from 5
5
p.m.
to
until 8
8.
p.m. And you can join us either in person or online. We'll be live streaming the first set. So hopefully you can join us one way or the other. And again, Andy, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks, Kareem. It was a real honor and a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Likewise. All right. Well, we will see you soon, and get some rest.
Right on. See
Take
you
care.
Sunday.
All righty. Bye.